But tonight we have Leonard G. Horowitz. He's on the line with us, and I'd like to welcome him to the show. You may have heard his name recently. We discussed it last week, and Reverend Wright has been on the news recently. He's been attacked for his statements that he said about the government creating AIDS to depopulate the African community around the world globally, that AIDS was created by the U.S. government to kill black people. Now, Reverend Wright was disowned recently by Obama. No surprise after he made these statements. He referenced a book by Leonard G. Horowitz. He's with us tonight, and he wrote a book about this very issue, but he also talks about other things as well, which we will go into. Leonard, thanks for coming on. Leonard, are you with us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you with us now. You have a very long bio, and I'm glad you're with us. You've written a lot of books about alternative health. Give us an overview into your background and how you got to where you are today discussing these complex issues.
Well, back in 1990, I was the chief investigator of the murder theory in a famous case of a Florida dentist that infected his patients with the AIDS virus. There were 6 patients that were infected, and I have a doctorate in medical dentistry from Tufts University, Harvard University Master's in Public Health, and I have another master's degree in health education, and I have another doctorate in naturopathic medicine. And so in 1990, I set about investigating that very bizarre case of how 6 patients could be infected by the AIDS virus from one dentist. And by 1993, I had solved the mystery of the case and then got blacklisted because the government had covered up all the absolutely amazing facts in the case that incriminated the dentist as a serial homicide, serial killer. And then, after being blacklisted from my professional programs with the world's largest dental and medical catalog supply company, I was their chief professional advisor, a company by the name of Henry Schein, Schein Pharmaceuticals, Schein Dental Supply. I was essentially engaged in further investigating a hideous document, which was a 1970 Department of Defense appropriations request for $2 million a year over 5 years, $10 million in total for the development of viruses that were descriptively and functionally identical to HIV/AIDS. And that's what started me on another investigation. After a total of 6 years investigating, I published the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola in 1996, in which I reprinted the United States government contracts under which numerous AIDS-like, Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered by the Army's 6th top biological weapons contracting lab called Litton Bionetics. They are a medical subsidiary of the mega military weapons contracting firm called Litton Industries. And that's what Reverend Wright was referring to when he was talking about compelling evidence in the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola that makes any reasonable person realize that what we have is a contract by which U.S. taxpayers paid $2 million a year over 5 years to finance what amounts to global genocide.
All right. This is a very touchy subject. You know, I mentioned that you're going to be on to a couple Obama supporters that also watch the show, and it baffles them that something like this could actually be going on that they aren't aware of. Leonard, I just want to pause here and express to you that it's very difficult to talk about these subjects, these wide variety of subjects that we talk about on this show and other shows like this, about the corruption taking place, about the history that this government has with engineering different types of viruses and bioweapons, and it not be discussed in the debates. We have a lot of people that are pro-war in the Portland metropolitan area, anti-war, that go to all the protests by the tens of thousands, many of them which today have Obama '08 stickers on the back of their car. What is your response to that and your overview of Barack Obama?
Well, I was very, very upset by the fact that he turned away from his minister and personal confidant and counsel for 20 years and basically left him out to hang. And he did that for politics. And, you know, for me, I'm a very spiritual person, and I think most African Americans are as well, very spirit-filled people. And I suspect strongly that's one of the reasons that they're targeted routinely for genocide, is because they're such loving people. And for me, I was prepared to vote for him, and as he did what he did, I lost, respect for him, and he will not get my vote. That's very, very clear. I understand what he did. It was a political savvy move to, disengage from his confidant and from a very, very wise and spirit-filled minister. But I really can't reconcile that, because ultimately, we have to make a decision between, are we going to play politics as usual, or are we going to get on with love? Are we going to get on with really what more of the Ron Paul movement is about? And I'm not really that pleased with Ron Paul yet either, because every single Ron Paul delegate, our major officials within the Ron Paul grassroots movement, has done what Obama ran from. They've embraced what Reverend Wright was talking about. They say that this is the number one critical issue, the most critical issue facing America today. As you mentioned, are the biological weapons, the incredible determination of the United States federal government to commit genocide and keep people such as the elderly, such as the poor, such as children and the sick at dire need and no help, but yet they're going to spend millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars in this ridiculous, military operation. So, from my perspective, what we're really dealing with is a military, medical, petrochemical, pharmaceutical cartel that is engaged in globalization and decimation of the population. There's a targeted depopulation agenda currently unfolding that all this news is all about, and that engages a philosophy belief that the world is overpopulated and we really need to reduce now about half to two-thirds of the world's people. When you really realize who's making that determination, that's the Rockefeller-directed, petrochemical pharmaceutical cartel and the Population Council of the City of New York that the Rockefellers directed, that are spinning off these policies and ideologies for population control. When you realize that these are the people that have suppressed all of the alternative technologies, the hydrogen fuels, the solar power, wind power, all these alternative energies, and instead have opted for oil going to $200 a barrel, as you noted, and the pollution and decimation of the environment ongoing, that those of us who have some understanding and intelligence and reason and history and historic facts and documentation to back it all up, we're appalled. And Barack Obama ran from it. He ran so fast from it, and in the process of running from it, in my opinion, he indicated who he really is.
Well, let me just jump in real quick. We also have the fact that he's continued to fund the war, if you look at his voting record, and he does support Blackwater, and he's got a whole gang of skeletons in his closet. But what's apparent to me is the population at large in the United States, if you talk a good talk, it still works today, even in 2008. I'll tell you, Leonard, with the economy imploding, if you read these mainstream reports, they keep acting like it's just because of the cost of oil, which is caused by terrorist attacks. So they can thus blame terrorism for our food prices going up and not look at UG99, the wheat virus, which may also be engineered. By the way, they're telling the third world that you have to take our genetically modified wheat seed if you want aid. And so it's a very complex predicament that the whole world is in, and the leaders out there, if they actually are anti-war and want to stop this, have to bring up these core things. Now, having said that, because I do want to talk about escaping the matrix with you and expanding consciousness, and that's something you're going to be talking about here in the Portland area in Vancouver on the 24th of May. Before we get to that, answer me this. You mentioned Zbigniew Brzezinski in some of your work and his part in all of this in terms of bioweapons. I find that to be interesting considering the fact that Zbigniew Brzezinski is the campaign advisor of Barack Obama.
Oh, that just indicates exactly what we're talking about. We're looking at a major player, and that's why he's gotten as far as he has come. The reality is that he's a globalist. He's engaged. He's in bed with the world's wealthiest military industrialists. And if he really gets the nomination, which would surprise me, but apparently that's what's going on, and if he does get the presidency because of that, which wouldn't surprise me at all, because the people generally are fed up with the Republican Party, and it looks to me like the Republican candidate is a corpse. He's a walking corpse. He's got virtually one foot in the grave, it appears, by listening to him, looking at him, and watching his behavior. So, it seems to me that Barack Obama at this point does appear to have a great chance of getting in. But again, when you see who's handling him, you see who's pushing him and funding him, it's frightening, because this is the same old. There's nothing new that's going to be happening if he were to become president, and that's indicated by the fact that he's not willing to take on the real issue of genocide that his minister had encouraged everyone to consider.
He's also for banning handguns through the UN, proposing a global taxation, following through with the official version of what is causing climate change, and the new legislative measures that will follow up to curtail our freedoms and movement. And you also have his wife and her membership in the Council on Foreign Relations and his economic advisor, Skull and Bones. And he also has connections to the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission through Zbigniew Brzezinski. So, you know what? I don't think people are going to wake up to that fact, Leonard, but we are in a shift. And there is something bigger than just the political slideshow arena. There are larger things happening. Having said that, to close on this conversation about Zbigniew Brzezinski, can you refer to that document and what was written in that memorandum?
Well, the memorandum you're discussing is the number 46, National Security Memorandum 46, that was really a genocidal document targeting blacks, and that I think is equally condemning. And when you talk about biological weaponry and HIV/AIDS, you've got to consider National Security Memorandum 200 that was penned or ordered by Henry Kissinger. And Kissinger is the one you can thank mostly for the AIDS virus. He's the reason that we have nuclear weapons deployed around the face of the planet. Brzezinski as well as Kissinger are basically operatives for the Rockefeller cartel. And it's the Rockefellers that have been pulling all the political strings on all the puppet politicians, directing Central Intelligence, and all of that is really a globalistic agenda, because when you look at where did the Rockefellers get their massive wealth, you've got to go back to London. You've got to go back to the Rothschild family of London and France and Europe, the European banksters, so to speak, and the royalty of Europe were working in cahoots with the banksters of Europe, and this is where Rockefellers really got their start in finance, banking, as well as petrochemical industry. So this is the good old boy network, and what you're right, I think, to me, as Reverend Wright said in his national news conference, Barack Obama and everyone else that are making these hideous decisions that are devastating and decimating the populations and the environment, all of these people are going to have to pay. You could play this game of God on this planet, but there's karma, there's judgment. And as they sow, so shall they reap. And they're sowing death and destruction, and they're going to have to live with the consequences of this. And it's a spiritual issue, and that is clearly what Reverend Wright was talking about. I believe it. I know it. It is absolutely certain. There is a spiritual renaissance ongoing today, and so many people are having increased synchronicities in their lives. There is an amazing increase in manifestations of prayer that is happening for people, good-hearted people, loving people, and that's the kind of things that, I'm pleased that your show is like out of the box. This is out of the box. Barack Obama's in the box. And for us to have resolution and a restoration and a sustenance of not only human beings, but all of the species, as you were talking about the bees, the birds, the entire environment is being attacked right now. And so this is omnicide. It's not simply genocide. Genocide is strictly defined in Webster's dictionary as the mass killing of people for politics, ideology, or profit. And all three of those are really going on today. The ideology is we have too many people. We got to reduce at least half to two-thirds of the population. The politics is very clear, as we've been talking about, and there's a lot of money being made by humanity's suffering.
You know, I just want to add something here to what you were saying about the environment and its degradation. It's devaluing, I guess, in the psyche of the average American or human being or person in China. You take a look at the NAFTA superhighway and all this land they're going to have to clear to make this superhighway. They're already clearing to make way in Indiana for I-69. So either Barack and Hillary, they haven't been going after that issue. Environmentalists, mainstream ones, don't know about it. They are clearing more forests for the NAFTA superhighway. Now, we've got other things that we need to discuss real briefly, and then we'll get into the real interesting stuff about breaking out of this matrix. Give us an overview, Leonard, because you have a lot of information. I'm glad you're here. About what's going on right now. I mean, we're looking at food riots. Okay, we're looking at the dollar collapsing. We're looking at the struggle between the United States, or at least it seems the United States and Russia, and their alliance with China, and their collective unity through the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes Iran. So with all this stuff about Iran possibly being attacked in the very, very near future, with another carrier being sent to the region, and Lebanon literally at war with itself right now between the government and Hezbollah fighting each other. Where do you see things escalating? And then from there, let's get into who you think's behind it.
Well, I personally, I take the same view that the same dim view that you take on organized religion. You know, it's like a pie has been divided up between governments, globalists, and governments, and the religious world, which is really, it's totally unchristian, it's totally unethical, immoral, and you know it's in a gross deception. And I could go into great detail, and I plan to do some of that during the Love Code seminar in Portland on the 24th that you mentioned. But what's really taking place here is Babylon is falling. This gross deception, this political, financial manipulation, and intoxication of humanity and the environment it has its rewards. It's karmic time. The party's over, and it's Judgment Day, and so it's really going to get seriously, frightening and sad for those who have no faith, for those who really are out of that Babylonian lunacy and into the matrix of divinity. It's going to be a joy for those of us who really have a full understanding of what's going down. You know, because there's an uplift, there's a spiritual blessing in this. It's kind of like the Bible verse, "Yea, though I can walk through this valley of the shadow of death," you know, where maybe in Psalm 91 it says, 10,000 are dying at my left, 1,000 at my right, but I can carry this certainty, clarity, and divinity in my heart and march triumphantly into 1,000 years of world peace. And so that's the real message. And so it's a flip side. It's the good news and the bad news. The worst news is the genocide and the omnicide. And the best news is that there's a spiritual renaissance unfolding that is unstoppable, because it's not mere mortals that are bringing this on. It is absolutely divine. It is by a divine revelation and process, really the whole concept of love, the real Da Vinci Code, the book that we've produced and the documentary we've produced and the seminar that's going to be in Portland on May 24th at the Red Lion Inn at the Key is going to be just so awesome, because we're going to revolutionize everything with the revelations. And sadly, those people who are clueless, who are in ignorance and are in deception, that have bought into the illusion that these political saviors are going to come and save us, and that these medical deities are going to somehow sustain us, that is coming down. Babylon is falling. For those of us who understand, we hold really the salvation message. It's really called the modern gospel. It's the great news. So there's great news and there's horrible news. My preference is to tune into the great news.
I understand that. One last question then on this topic, and then we'll move forward. You're talking about bioweapons, depopulation. Can you describe from your perspective the ideology of the people that are moving this direction? What we know about them, at least according to your research.
Yeah, the best book to read is called Death in the Air: Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare. And that title came out 3 months before September 11th, 2001. So it's a prophetic title. Think about it. Death in the Air: Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare. And that book makes it very clear what you're experiencing. Folks listening, what you're experiencing right now is an intoxication. Look around you. Everybody is obese. Everybody's sick. Everybody's tired. Everybody's drained out. The environment is degraded. You used to see a blue sky and a yellow sun. Now you see a hazy white, grayish blue, if you see blue at all, and you got a sun that's completely overcast. It looks white. And the reality is that this is part and parcel of what's called non-lethal warfare. The scientific manner of killing populations most profitably deals with intoxicating them first with chemicals, followed by biologicals. So you have a combination of chemicals that are being sprayed in the air, these chemtrail sprays, intoxication of the food, intoxication of the water, intoxication of everything that's going into the human body now causes the immune system to become weak. Then you become more susceptible to the opportunistic infections and the laboratory creations. Not just HIV/AIDS, we're talking about mycoplasma, the thing that's causing people to have this flu-like illness that won't quit. Weeks, if not months, people are hacking and coughing and having the return of flu-like symptoms. That's a germ that was produced at Tanax Biomedical Systems in Houston, Texas, co-owned by James Baker III, Secretary of State under George Bush, and a major shareholder was George H.W. Bush.
Oh, wow.
They produced that. They shot it up into the Gulf War troops as they were leaving for the Gulf War back in 1990. They brought it back. It's been a spreading epidemic ever since. And what's very fascinating is, sadly so, is that it's patented by the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, this germ, and is the principal cause of all of the symptoms of not only AIDS, but also this flu-like illness that so many Americans now are suffering with.
Yes, and I get many emails from them, people that are watching the chemtrails in our skies. It's not a big topic on the show because it's always been something that's overwhelming, and there's been limited data on that particular issue. But until like this last year, Leonard, a lot more information has come out about that particular issue, the aluminum oxide, the barium. There's just a lot of info. We have someone named Gwen Scott, I believe, who's a former CNN anchor, and she's a part of a chemtrail convergence coming up this weekend in Los Angeles. So more people are actually talking about the issue, and I will watch a beautiful day manifest itself, wake up, clear blue skies like the other day, and by about, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, there's the plane doing loops around the city, and in a matter of hours, your blue sky is gone. It's just an even haze, and that haze carries over to the next day because they also spray at night. And all of a sudden, our weather is different, but we don't have people actually asking, what are those planes doing up there? Why aren't they going to the airport? What are they doing just circling around? Do you think at some point the average American is going to wake up to the reality that something's going on, or that some honest elements of the U.S. government may come forward?
I don't hold out a lot of hope for that. I was just, for example, when Reverend Wright came out with recommending emerging viruses, AIDS and Ebola, and people who were serious about the genocide against blacks and AIDS, you see, you would have thought that CNN would have really done a story. Well, I can tell you that CNN scheduled to do that, and then it was pulled. I was interviewed. They never aired it. There's a whole control going on in the media. The mass mind is controlled by the mass media, and so long as the mainstream media is violating the constitutional responsibility that was given to them, under freedom of the press and simply being mouthpieces for the Central Intelligence Agency and the global industrialists, we're not going to have the mass mind shift. Again, I'm looking at the shift in the heart. I'm looking at a spiritual renaissance. I'm looking at what's taking place in the ethers right now that is absolutely evidenced by what's taking place in our lives. I'm sure that you've experienced it. There's a lot of other people that are part of our friends and family, our extended family, our networks, who already know something wonderful is taking place, despite the fact that there's this urgency.
Synchronicity is a term you mentioned earlier in the show, and I can't say enough about synchronicity. There's something amazing happening with people. There's a lot of darkness taking place on the planet, but a lot of people are waking up to something. They don't exactly know what it is yet, and people are also reacting differently, in some ways negatively, and in some cases suicide, because they don't know how to deal with all this energy. They're experiencing sometimes not good energy, highly negative. Wherever that's coming from, people are waking up to something and their awareness level is increasing. I want to ask you about where you think we're going in the next couple years in terms of this shift. Now, it's been said that things get worse before they get better, and we've been talking about that, the economic fallout, them bringing down the dollar by design. But on the other side of this, where do we find ourselves exactly?
Well, really, where we find ourselves right now is engaged in a spiritual renaissance. And what my ministry does, and what the seminar, the Love Code Seminar Musical Healing Celebration in Portland on the 24th, Saturday, all day and into the evening, we're going to be having a concert of the music. Why music? Well, there is an electromagnetic matrix. There is a musical mathematical matrix of the entire universe. And that essentially what we've been blessed with is the revelations of not just Leonardo da Vinci's famous Vitruvian man drawing, 4 arms, 4 legs, and a head, is a cryptograph that we've decrypted, and the revelations in the decryption tell us that the entire cosmos is created by 9 tones, 9 simple musical notes. The frequencies we now know. Those frequencies have been determined by the world's leading mathematicians and physicists to be the core creative frequencies of the universe. So given the fact that we now have the core creative frequencies, the sounds that can shift everything, we understand everything is creation. And if we want to recreate ourselves to be healthy and whole, if we want to recreate our planet to be completely a blessing instead of a curse, then this is how we do it. This is the technology that shall set us free. I'm absolutely convinced of it. The science is in. Everything speaks to it. And also to the extent that it's been suppressed, just like the truth about the news has been suppressed, the truth shall set you free. And the greatest secreted truths in history have the capacity to emancipate us completely. And that's what we now have. So it's really, I'm doing this tour with the Love Code Seminar, Musical Healing Celebration, with Scott Huckabee, who's really like the universal guitarist for the spiritual renaissance, and other performers. We're revolutionizing the music industry right now. We're revolutionizing healthcare with these revelations. Again, when you think about everything is part of creation, and we have the core creative frequencies of sound, that is the matrix. There is, in essence, a musical mathematical matrix of divinity that can bless humanity, that we can partake in now and utilize and steward and apply for the urgencies that we're facing. And really, I'm telling you, salvation, physical and spiritual evolution rests in these revelations. So I'm humbled and I'm privileged to share them in Portland on the 24th, and I highly encourage everyone to get there, because it'll be not only a life-shifting and uplifting thing that you do, but get your friends there, because they'll thank you for the rest of their lives. It'll be probably the greatest blessing that they've ever had.
Well, we have the graphic up for your website, both of them, in addition to the other website that shows them where they can get information about registering for that particular event. Let me ask you a question. Now, it seems that technologically we have continued to accelerate our evolution on multiple levels, from technology to civilization to the population growth. What do you think is driving all of this human activity? The last 100 years have been real interesting.
Well, the way I've kind of like got one foot in the real world and one foot in the spiritual world, and I really enjoy more the spiritual world, because it's like, how many
Sure.
people really enjoy sleep? Most people really enjoy sleep. Well, there's a whole spiritual realm there, and there's also parallel universe operating right here. It's akin to the kingdom of heaven in the religious world. It is right here, right now. The physicists and mathematicians, and as we explain it, it's a musical mathematical matrix. There's tremendous proof in this. In the last couple of days, I've done seminars throughout Western Canada, and the audiences, probably 50 to 80% of the audiences have had experiences like near-death experiences where suddenly, like, everything becomes, in their experience, slow motion and etheric. And there is a comfort zone that happens, like a tremendous cocoon like of protection that goes around you as a human being when you are entering into a phase of leaving this planet as a physical being, and you engage now in the possibility of dying. And the fact that that exists in every one of us indicates that we have this glorious creator, this master conductor, master composer of the universal orchestra that loves us so much that he's willing to take the pain and trauma out of our experience when we're passing into the next realm. So that's just like one of many, many indications now, and evidences, empirical evidence, obvious things that indicate, hey, we're more than physical beings. And though we could get polluted and intoxicated, if we carry that spirit, that is our greatest protection. And we can enhance that with now the knowledge that we've got the music. So it's a matter of playing the music that shall set us free from all this physical lunacy.
I understand. The level of intensity seems to be increased on the planet, but not just, like I said, in the negative way, but in terms of the positive. I look at a lot of people moving in this direction to grow more food. Not enough to make the change that we need right now, but you're starting to see people become aware of a different reality. I think sometimes, Leonard, they don't necessarily know why they're doing what they're doing in terms of getting prepared, learning about permaculture, living off the land. But it's almost as if we've all been kind of shot with this God shot, if you will, a psychic awakening, that we're about to go through something really, really intense. And we got to hold on to our senses and cultivate our spirituality in the process. Can you speak to these intense times that we live in? Because I'll tell you, for me personally, and a lot of people watching the show right now, we are being bombarded by so much information, not just in terms of the news, but in terms of stuff coming from elsewhere that we may not be able to identify. So it is a very interesting time to be alive, but B, I think a big challenge for all of us to question why we're here and what we're doing with our lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is the main mission of my work and the seminar that we're talking about. The fact is that people need to prepare now. And if you're not going to prepare your heart, literally that's the only thing that's going to save you. And that's based, again, on a tremendous amount of evidence and information from various fields I don't have even time to go into here. But what you're talking about in terms of sustainability, physical salvation, spiritual evolution, and environmental sustainability versus toxicity, and the depletion of resources, the decimation of everything that is sacred about this planet and ourselves, that this is a shift. We have the information. It's a matter now of just sharing, because it's got to be grassroots. It's got to be me personally sharing with you, my brother, you know, the sisters out there. We're one family. This is one evolution in unity that we're moving forward in. And everything from permaculture instead of this mass consumption. You know, the American dream was based on consumerism. Well, think of the word itself. sum. The sum total of it is a con. And instead of that, we've got to engage in production, and we've got to engage in resource allocation that's sustainable, in engaging permaculture, growing our own foods, making sure that those foods are safe to eat, not GMO, manipulated. And so this is really a evolution in consciousness that I'm privileged to be and humbled to be, leading with many colleagues and friends hand in hand.
There's one thing that I do want to ask you, and it's come up on the radar repeatedly by other researchers. It's not a regular topic on this show, but we will see what the future holds, and that is the issue of extraterrestrials or whatever may be going on out there in the desert, whether it's Area 51, but even deeper in other countries, maybe Iraq. What is your take on things such as that, or the sophistication of the global DNA database that's currently being constructed?
Well, I'll lay kind of like a bomb right now. But, when you really, first of all, I have a Harvard Master's in Public Health degree in behavioral science. So I'm really heavily trained in behavioral science, and I can judge behavior, human behavior, very, very well. And I can tell you that what's taking place by the President of the United States, and even as indicated by Barack Obama and the other candidates who are playing political ball like as usual, this is not human. To turn your eye against genocide, the mass killing and enslaving and polluting and intoxicating through the pharmaceuticals, through the vaccinations, all of this is not human. It's not loving.
That's the barrier, Leonard, that I face when I present actual facts and documents. What human being would be behind this? How could they keep all of this secret? I mean, Leonard, we've got 5 minutes left, by the way, with you. But I'm just telling you, it's not an area that I'm doing the show 3 years, and I'm telling you, there is a scientific blueprint to this, and just because we can't identify a human elite doesn't mean there isn't a design, a diabolical design of some form to control us. The one word, Leonard, that comes to mind is ancient, not modern. This whole thing about giving our freedoms up for phony security and turning our responsibility instead from ourselves, but over to leaders so they can figure out things for us. It's like an ancient art form of controlling people through presenting someone that you think is going to do the right thing for you, but in the end doing something completely different. How do they coordinate all of this stuff if it was just a human thing? I'm not saying I know what's going on, but I have major questions right now that I don't think have been adequately answered out there.
You're absolutely right. Here's the best indication. For those of you listening who are disbelievers, who can't believe that there's literally an extraterrestrial or alien to human agenda unfolding, why don't you just go get a Pepsi? Go get a bottle of Pepsi and take it into your bathroom. So you look at it in the mirror in reverse and count the numbers of the letters. You'll see that there's numbers in the letters of Pepsi. And when you realize that that's in a logo, and then when you realize that the X's and O's, when you read the book I recommended, Death in the Air, you'll realize that the Illuminati have a code, an alphanumeric code that the English language was created using. And when you realize that X's and O's are sixes, just like when you do the numbers, you'll see Pepsi comes down to a 6. P-E-P-S-I is backwards 1, 2, that's a 3, that's the 3, 9, 3, 9. When you add the numbers and then reduce it to the single-digit integer, it's a 6. Fox, F-O-X, is 666. X's and O's are 6s. Play tic-tac-toe. You got 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. When you say cross my heart and hope to die and cross your fingers and cross your heart, now you've just made 6, 6, 6. Adult entertainment, XXX is 666. When you realize that this has been going on in front of our faces all these years, there is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy reality. And you better wake up to it, otherwise you're going to be decimated along with the rest of the population.
Where do you think we're going to go from here in terms of these extraterrestrials? We know there's disinformation out there in terms of the U.S. government preparing to perhaps fight ETs in the future through an intergalactic war. They say that's one of the reasons, although a lot of people don't know that, for the space weapons. So it could just be propaganda, but I wonder where, put it this way, where the real ET crafts are coming in and where we're looking at the black ops, the Area 51 stuff, the stuff the government has been developing or perhaps given. Where's the real stuff and where's the fake stuff? I'm wondering what's going to happen in the next 10 years in terms of everyday American, Chinese, European consciousness when it comes to this issue, because some people are starting to report these sightings more than they were a decade ago.
You know, what all of the issues you raise are literally, for most people, so confusing. Cutting to the chase, cutting to the solution. The solution is, number one, you got to have your relationship right with the Creator, within yourself, within your own heart. You've got to hold the self-esteem within yourself that connects you to the divine source, and esteem that. And let that be your guide. Let that be your lead, because that is the only avenue to salvation. And that's, in a nutshell, what it's all about. This whole trauma, the population elimination, decimation, population reduction, the disease, the crisis is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get your relationship right with the Creator and each other as loving human beings.
Well, Leonard, we're out of time. I want to thank you for coming on. Let's go over basically the basic facts that people may want to be aware of. We have your websites up on the screen for people to write down. We're talking about May 24th. Now, that's going to be in Portland or in Vancouver, Washington?
Yeah, Vancouver, Washington, at the Red Lion Inn at the Key. And there's a toll-free number for people who can't get online. The best place to get the tickets would be online at lovecode, C-O-D-E, seminar.com. And then there's a toll-free number for people who can't
Well, we'll go ahead and let them go to the website because we can't give the number out on this show.
Oh, okay.
They can go ahead and learn more about information about the event at that website. I want to thank you for coming on, Leonard. I also understand Jeff Rentz will be a guest here at this event, perhaps?
Well, I'm praying that he will show up. He'll make it. We're honoring him with a American Unsung Hero Award.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting Jeff. He's published a couple of my articles in the past, and he definitely has a great radio show. So I will see you then, Leonard.
Thanks so much, Alex. I look forward to seeing you at the event.
All right. We'll see you then.